Dobar dan svima ponovo želim. Sada nastavljamo program i evo iskoristit ću priliku, preći ću sad na engleski. So because we are now continuing with our program, with our agenda, I want to introduce you to Mr. Mark Rachovides, the president of Euromines from Brussels. Mark, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're further east on this 17th of November. You'll guess from my surname that I am of Greek origins, and today is a special day. In Greece, we celebrate the return to democracy, and we should be celebrating that perhaps in other ways as well. The reason I say that is I can't chart a future for our industry in Europe without understanding where we are today. So if you'll forgive me, what I will do is I'll split my presentation really into three parts. I'll set out a little bit what I think are the main issues for today. Then I'll try and set out what I think should be coming next. And lastly, how we're going to do it. So today, obviously, the largest item on anybody's agenda is the pandemic. And in very simple terms, it affects our day-to-day lives in ways that I certainly don't need to describe. But in terms of our industry, it obviously affects the way that we work and we do business as well. And it illustrates some deeper problems in that. Some companies face shutdowns, be they voluntary or mandatory shutdowns. They have difficulty accessing supplies. It's difficult for experts, consultants to travel. There's problems with staff. Staff health and safety is of paramount importance in this time. Supply chains, lead times are becoming longer. There are problems in distribution. There's a risk. The amount of risk in terms of key consumables and materials is increasing. There's disruption. Chemicals, for example, reagents that we use in industrial facilities, tires, explosives, all these simple things that we consume every day. Deliveries are becoming less certain. This theme of uncertainty is what I'm going to keep coming back to. We don't seem to have labour shortages at the moment. However, we do expect them to present in the near future. Some contractors are experiencing difficulties and shortages. Some consumers are behaving differently. You have some of our buyers that are stockpiling, some are holding off. There's all sorts of implications for prices there. Again, a theme I'll come back to. I mentioned democracy. The other large event recently is the United States election. We are in a very changed world, and that is both demographic, population growth, economic change in the east and the south of this world, particularly as we describe it, sitting where we are. Geopolitical change. The old multilateralism, the old certainties are no longer with us, and we are building a new world as we speak. There's disruption, there's uncertainty, and at the same time, we also have, by definition, changed market conditions, where your customers are changing, where demographics are changing, where, trade relationships are changing. These are very significant to our industry, of course they are. Lastly, climate change. Climate change is inescapable to all of us. I don't propose to discuss whether it is real or not. It is on the agenda, whether you believe in it or not. In Europe, we call that the Green Deal, the Green Agenda, how we are supposed to respond as Europeans and as Europe to climate change. In terms of Europe, then, what does this all really mean, all these things I've set out? It's illustrated. I've talked about uncertainty, about vulnerabilities, about prices, about changes. It illustrates the need to be aware of where we are. As Europeans, as the European Union in particular, we must really talk in terms of our economic resilience or even our economic integrity or sovereignty. We're dependent upon imports for many things as Europeans, directly or indirectly, all of us, whether our countries are resource rich or not. We process and use an enormous amount of imported goods. We need to review that. We need to see, can we sustain that? With all of those things in mind, I'd like to discuss what's coming next. The important thing is we have a plan. We have the EU recovery plan. We have the Green Deal. We have a revised list of critical raw materials. And now we have all sorts of practical steps. For example, today, there are numerous meetings going on throughout Europe, centered in Brussels, and this conference fits very well into that. And one of the subjects that's being announced and discussed is the European Raw Materials Alliance. You'll start to hear quite a lot of that in the coming weeks. In terms of what does this all mean, it means a realization that we're moving to a future where the old realities cannot hold. That's primarily focused, of course, on energy and how that energy is generated, transmitted, and distributed. And for that, we need an awful lot of raw materials. We have to be very honest in terms of Europe. What will we need? From where will we get it? And how will we deliver it? A lot of those raw materials we have in Europe. Copper, something everyone in Serbia is very, very familiar with. Zinc, lead, steel, aluminium, all of these simple household, boring things we will need in very, very large amounts if we are completely to overhaul our economy towards a green future. Green future isn't something we can just import. Many countries don't have the luxury of abundant hydroelectric power. Not everybody is Canada or Sweden. We have to generate power for our needs in order to deliver the future that we promise for our children. So how will we do this? How will it be different to the world we know today? Will we mine the same things? And will we mine them in the same way? And who will we mine them for? I suppose the largest difference is the role of government. This is a more complicated issue. It's a fact today in response to the pandemic, and in some cases due to political change, the role of government is far greater than it was 5 or 10 years ago. Government has taken a much more active role in economy, and it's taken a much more active role in industry in many countries. We better get used to it. This isn't going to change. This presents some issues. We used to think in terms of the conflict between the democratic cycle and industry, the fact that elections happen every 3, 4, 5 years. And yet industrial projects, by their very nature, take far longer. How can you explore, develop, produce, and then rehabilitate a mine site in the space of one government? This is impossible. What we see increasingly is a consensus whereby the differences that used to cause this uncertainty between political parties, between regimes, between in and outgoing civil servants, etc., the differences are actually lessening. The consensus is changing, and that is allowing for a greater acceptance for the role of government. That's not fixed yet. We have to understand what that's actually going to mean. But in many cases, that means government sponsorship of projects, government investment in projects, government investment in research and development and innovation, and greater government focus on how products are produced and traded. So how will this affect us? Will we mine the same things is a question that I asked. Yes, obviously, I've already said that we still need copper and the other materials that I mentioned if we are to essentially deliver a new infrastructure for Europe's industry. And this, of course, has implications for trade. We can't produce everything we need immediately. We will develop projects, but we must rely on trade with our existing partners. And this afternoon, for example, I will act as a rapporteur in the meeting between the European Commission and Natural Resources Canada for the CETA, the Canada-EU Trade Agreement, where there is a specific chapter on natural resources. But beyond looking at trade, we need to look at new types of mining. Europe has thousands of old sites, thousands of sites that have, for whatever reason, either been abandoned or have been laid to rest and seen as economic, seen as legacy. But we know with increasing certainty that there lie resources within those sites. Some estimates are of 7,000 to 8,000 of those sites just within the European Union, perhaps 10,000 to 12,000 within the continent of Europe. This is an abundant treasure of resources. It allows us to deploy our technology, our expertise, our knowledge, and at the same time clear up the legacy of the past and, of course, do so in a commercial way. It also then provides further expertise for recycling, for landfill, for use of these sites, for example, for energy generation. It's a whole new way of looking at mining. So primary mining, secondary mining, recycling. This should give us some comfort to the previous point I mentioned, that it doesn't mean that governments have to then understand exploration. We have to do exploration, but we should not be desperate to say, without exploration, we cannot prosper. We can also do so in a slightly different way. We all know, particularly the audience and the participants to conferences like these, that geology is no respecter of political borders. So we need to see more regional projects. Geological formations, of course, go across borders, but what we need to do is to talk in terms of vertical integration. Why can't we see more cross-border economies of scale? Why can't we distribute product and services and expertise more effectively regionally, deploying new technologies? This also fits in very well to another problem. I talked about consensus. One of the issues of consensus is what some people call the social license to operate. You will undoubtedly speak about this in this conference. It's a regular subject. We have to change our behavior in terms of understanding what standards mean. People won't do that because people like you and I tell them. They do so when they see real examples of new technologies delivering benefits. You have to remove fear and uncertainty. I'll come back to this. I also asked who all of these new activities would be. Markets are changing. Markets are changing very much. Prices will start to reflect this. Commodities, and I referred to consumer behavior earlier, will increasingly be seen as stores of value. We're looking forward in many people's eyes to a period of incoming inflation. Traditionally, in periods of inflation, commodity prices will rise. That's not only precious metals, but commodities will intrinsically be seen as greater investments. So how do we put all this together? You've got all these different avenues, all these different uncertainties, all these different themes. We need to look at this as opportunity. We need to look at how we create what some people call cross-cutting, how you cut across different sectors. How can a mining project benefit the tourism sector? How can a mining project benefit the recycling center and in turn benefit renewable energy? My general answer to that is by simple hard work and good examples, but nothing is possible without money. I should say that 3 times. Money, 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 more times. But today we're sit in a world where we face something called ESG. Terrifies lots of people. Lots of other people have absolutely no idea what it means. Some people with grey hair like me wonder if some of the people who practice ESG know what it means. It seems to be changing its meaning. But I do believe in it. I do believe that it is our responsibility to be environmentally forward-looking, to be environmentally responsible, to behave like good corporate citizens and have a better understanding of what we mean by sustainability, not to satisfy ourselves or our accountants, but to satisfy the people whose products, who use our products, I beg your pardon, and who are our neighbors and our taxpayers, our workers, the children of our workers, the parents of our workers. We need, therefore, everyone to see what the opportunities are. And unless you change values and change behaviors, and prices and expectations won't follow. We may need to think in terms of trade barriers. I don't mean that as a general statement towards protectionism, not at all. But I think it means that we have to realize that you can't have high standards in your country and say, no, you will not do this, or you must do this in this way, and then import what you need in order to produce things from another country that does not do those things. Some people talk in terms of carbon border taxes, in other words, as part of the Green Deal, to recognize the true carbon footprint of every input to a market and therefore provide a competitive playing field. Some industries, some subsections of the mining industry argue for it, some argue against it. But I think my point is not to advocate trade barriers, but to say that this must be discussed in the context of the mining industry as a whole. We are not divorced from it. We are not apart from it, but we are indeed part of it. In other words, we need integrated policies, a staged approach. You need a lot of hard work. We need to find the right projects, of course we do. We don't just want showpieces, however, and then, as I said, import what we need from China and turn a blind eye to the issues. We need a modern approach to the industry in Europe. By that, I mean much more resource efficiency, and you need to valorize that. You need to actually be rewarded for that. You need standards. Standards are the only way you can exemplify the Green Deal by becoming more green and delivering change. Europe's the only place realistically today that can do this. I have great respect and admiration for our Canadian friends, but there are only 37 million of them. There are rather more Europeans. We're a much larger market. We produce a great deal more. I'm sorry for the background noise. We have money. We have the financial markets. I'm not going to switch that off, I'm sorry. We have the financial markets, we have the research and development, the intellectual capacity, and the leadership in Europe. Mining consultancy, mining innovation, mining services generally comes from Europe. I've quoted this before in this gathering. When we look at supply of mining services to North America from Europe, it's far larger than the other way around. We export throughout the world. We export to China, we export to Asia, we export to Africa, to Australia. We have the intellectual capacity. I can hear someone speaking in the background. I apologize. It's not from my end. Resources can be developed very well throughout Europe. Thank you. Resources can be developed very well throughout Europe, within the European Union, with the support of the European Union institutions and its member states, but also in its neighbors. In Serbia, your resources are extraordinary. Copper, lithium, you know them better than I do. I'm an extremely avid friend of Serbian mining. I enjoy participating in these events greatly. Most of all, I enjoy the energy that the Serbian mining sector provides. I hope that you can infect, to use a current word, the rest of Europe with that energy. I wish you all a very successful conference. I wish you every success in your endeavors, and I wish you and your families good health and safety. Thank you very much.
Dear Mark, thank you for this very interesting presentation, for your lovely speech, as every time. It was really a pleasure to have you again after, I think, 2 years that you haven't been with us on this conference, and I hope next year and all other years as well, the future years, you will be again with us and have good speeches like this one was.